Hello world. Welcome to my weekly live Q&A. My name is Danny Segura. You know me. I'm a reporter, mixed martial arts reporter for MMAJunkie.com, and like I said at the very beginning, this is my weekly live Q&A where I answer your questions regarding everything going on in the combat sports world plus much more. So, here's Hachiko. If you guys were wondering, where is he? He's out here getting thick like usual. Um and yes, sorry for the delay and sorry for the altered time slot because I usually do these around 7 p.m. every Tuesday, and this time obviously we got a 7:30 p.m. start time, or really 7:35 because I was a little bit late. But obviously with UFC 251 coming up this weekend, things kind of not super crazy at work, but certainly the workload has picked up. So everybody's quite busy nowadays. Plus a lot of things happening. I mean, COVID-19 has just made covering this sport a lot more complicated because a lot more things are happening, of course. So yeah, I mean it's been a little bit of a busy day, but I'm here, so let's get this thing started. I don't know how far I got into your questions, by the way, but I try to feature everything that was um, asked on Twitter. By the way, again, a little disorganized in this one. You can submit questions via Twitter, but obviously it's too late now because the video already started. So those who submitted questions via Twitter will get their questions answered at the beginning of this video. And then at some point towards the later part of this video, I will take things over to the YouTube live chat, which I see some of you guys are already commenting stuff there. And I'll answer those questions then. So no worries, all good. If you didn't have time to ask via Twitter, you get to do so in the live chat. Just throw it on there, and I'll go down and be answering questions as I go. So let's get right into it. Again, big weekend, UFC 251, a lot going on as well. This is unofficially brought to you by Heineken, official sponsor of the Champions League, and now unofficially my weekly live Q&A, at least for this week. I actually ran out of beer, but anyways, let's get this thing going. 8 Passive Woken is back at it again, and he says, with the passing of Khabib's father, will we see a delay in his return? While some have turned around and fought like Walt Harris, those are the exceptions and not the norm, I would think. Because he would need to start his training camp soon, so Justin versus Connor, and then Khabib in December or 2021. Yeah, so good question. By the way, you misspelled Habib there at the end. Get it right. Come on. It's easy. Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, last Friday it was reported that Khabib Nurmagomedov's father had passed away. He had been battling with COVID-19, or not necessarily COVID-19, but he had COVID-19, which led to some complications. And he's been battling already with this issue, and he was in serious condition already for several months. I believe he got it like sometime late April, early May. Reports were kind of never, not that they weren't on point, but there was very little reporting done on this end. And Habib, you know him. He's a very private individual and likes to keep his matters to himself. So we didn't know much about Habib's father and the situation. Just every now and then a report would pop up, and unfortunately, it came to this. Very sad to say, that man has a big influence in MMA, believe it or not, especially in that part of the world. I mean, he was a huge component in Khabib's development and many other fighters as well. Like, I mean, you can go back and every now and then in interviews, and quite often Khabib would just say, like, I don't understand how this guy's so strong. My father is ridiculous. I learned so much from this and that. It was someone that he obviously was very close to, not only from a family side, being his father, obviously, but also from a career side. It was someone that taught him a lot, and it was someone that's very influential to his fighting career. So my condolences to the Nurmagomedov family. Big loss. And yeah, 57, man. He passed away at 57. That's still very young. I mean, that's younger than my parents. My parents are in their 60s, and I consider them still pretty young. So crazy, very unfortunate. And that's why you guys got to be careful when you go out there, not only to protect yourself but to protect others. Wear a mask. Do your best to wash your hands as often as possible. try to avoid crowds, and together we can help the spread of COVID-19. Maybe not stop fully, but certainly lessen, and that means saving lives. So very, very important thing to do. Um, and yeah, as far as your question's concerned, that's obviously a factor. I mean, losing your father, losing your coach, that has to hit you pretty hard. Now you can be like Walt Harris, and he felt like he needed to fight and not sort of take a step back and time off. Needed to get back right in there because that's what his daughter would have wanted. His stepdaughter, we obviously know she tragically passed away as well. Um, and look at Cody Stanman as well. His little brother passed away. We're still unsure as to why. At least at the time, he didn't really have much explanation. It seemed like it just happened while he was asleep, from what I understand. I don't know if more details have surfaced since, but his little brother, he was just 18. He passed away, and he showed up and fought Brian Kelleher, remember? And he had one of his best performances in the UFC. And then after, you just see sort of his emotions pour out, and he starts crying and sort of breaking down a little bit. So yeah, for some people, it can be therapeutic to get in the gym and sort of have a goal and all that, and do it in the name of their loved ones. And some others want time off and want to stay away from the gym and sort of ease their way back into it. So I don't know what direction Khabib will go. I guess we'll get some sort of resolution fairly soon, because Dana White did say he wanted a title unification bout going down in the fall, and the fall is just around the corner. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't want to speculate, especially on these type of things. You can speculate on certain things with certain facts, but with this, you don't really know how each person's gonna react. But yeah, it's tough to tell. So again, I don't want to speculate, but I would say that it definitely plays a factor for sure. Um, yeah, my condolences to the Nurmagomedov family. All right, question number 2 by the Seaside. Shouts out to the Seaside. Um, who had a more understated camp, Max or Jorge? So this is actually a very good question. I like it very much. Seaside always coming through with the clutch questions. So for those that don't know, Max Holloway basically said that he had been training through Zoom, that he had no contact, he didn't spar at all, he didn't see any of his coaches. It was all of his coaches talking through Zoom. So that's pretty, I mean, at least to me, it's kind of worrisome. And today, actually, on the media day, I spoke to um, Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. I got to ask them both questions. We were doing a digital, virtual scrum like we're used to now. I guess this is the new normal. And I asked him, I'm like, because he kept saying he doesn't believe. He doesn't believe Max Holloway saying, he was doing his camp through Zoom. He doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe it. And I was a little surprised nobody followed up and be like, why don't you believe it? And like, do you see it as a possibility? Maybe like, is it possible to get ready for a world-class fight using Zoom? Is it possible? I don't know. So I asked him. He's the expert, right? He's the professional fighter, and he's like, nope. You need contact. Like my gym went out of the way to the government to get an exemption so we could have people in training, and so we can have contact. And he's like, I've been doing contact for 6 weeks, and prior to that, I was doing none, but I was staying, healthy, strong, training as far as staying athletic and keeping your fitness level up. And he's like, I wasn't ready for a fight, no way, even if I was healthy physically. So that's his truth. We don't know if that also applies to Max Holloway, but if you ask me and other experts, like, what's the most ideal? Would you rather have a training camp with training partners, the coaches, and a gym that you can go to, or would you rather stay at home and train while we give you tips through Zoom and you do things on your own? I mean, certainly, I think both can benefit from that, but you can get some benefit from both. But you would probably make a good argument that being in the gym with training partners and all that is more beneficial. So that's sort of Max Holloway's situation. Now, on the other hand, you got Jorge Masvidal, who, to be honest, I don't even know what his level of fitness is. I mean, He took the fight on short notice, right? But again, it was against an opponent that has sort of been on his mind at 4 months. I mean, this was the fight that we thought it was going to originally happen for this card, as opposed to Gilbert Burns, of course. But so he's known about that opponent, and so it's not like he's jumping into a brand new challenge and he's like, "All right, guys, what's happening? Give me the briefing. What's going on? What's this guy good at? Let's study tape." No, he knows Usman, and I spoke to Mike Brown several times, and he's like, back before even Burns fought Woodley, he's like, I feel like that fight's close enough to the point that we're already training for Usman. So keep that in mind. So even though he took the fight on short notice, it's not really all that short notice, right? However, he didn't have in mind that this weekend he was going to be in a 25-minute world-class fight against the best fighter at 170 pounds. So, that has to suck as well, right? That's definitely not beneficial. So, who had the more understated camp, to your question, Seaside? It's a tough one, because on one side you got someone that trained via Zoom, allegedly, and on the other hand you have someone that likely trained with people. In fact, Mike Brown told me that he was actually training with some high-level wrestlers like Bo Nickel and who's the other, Corey Law, I think. Both of them, I looked them up. Obviously, I know about Bo Nickel, and both are All-Americans. So he has been doing some sort of training, and we know he's a lifelong martial artist. It's a guy that's martial arts is just part of his lifestyle. So that's a tough one, man. I don't know, because there's so many unknowns. Like, do I buy that Max Holloway? By no means am I calling Max Holloway a liar, but we've seen fighters maybe not say the truth before, right? So I don't know if that's the case. So let's assume he's doing via Zoom, and let's assume that Jorge hasn't been training all that much. I would say Jorge. Because at the end of the day, even though if it was through Zoom, I'm sure that Max Holloway is getting advice from his coaches. He does have that date in mind. He is prepping for a weight cut. So he's had all those factors in mind, whereas Masvidal is just kind of, factoring them in the moment. Okay, I got to make weight on Friday. Shit. Okay, I'm fighting Usman. And yes, I know I was supposed to fight him, but I'm really fighting him now. So, again, there's a bunch of other things in mind. So I would say that Jorge probably had the more understated camp, but it's one of those things that there's unknowns in both equations. So it's really hard to tell unless you have all the facts laid out in front of you. Good question, though. And I have questions. I mean, I want to see how Max looks. If he really did his training camp via Zoom, I want to see what that looks like. Because at the end of the day, that's a guy that's been fighting for a really long time. Do I really think he needs sparring to get better? It'd probably help him, but his technique's already there. I mean, he's got muscle memories for years now. I mean, he knows how to fight. Back to what I was saying last week about Mike Perry. Like, people asking me, like, oh, what do you think about his girlfriend being in his corner? And some of the comments that Mike Perry said afterwards. Like, there's something very true about either you know how to fight or you don't. Simple as that. You can give the same amount of information to 3 people, and those 3 people can have different developments in technique. It all comes down to whether you know how to fight or not. That's definitely a thing. And believe me, Max Holloway is a fighter. He knows how to fight. Believe me, Jorge Masvidal is a fighter. He knows how to fight. So I think if there's any fighters that would maybe not benefit, but would probably do best without a training camp, Max Holloway and Jorge Masvidal have to be at the top, along with Mike Perry. All those guys know how to fight. They know how to scrap naturally. So, anyways, kind of going on a rant here. But anyways, the third question by Jose Navarrete. Hello, Danny. Saludos de la Florida. With UFC requiring 5 COVID tests for Fight Island, do you think that they are being a bit excessive? With the unreliability of the tests, this could be necessary to catch misses or stop a fighter who is actually negative. Oh, you mean positive? Anyways, no, I think more is better. I think with these type of situations where we're dealing with COVID-19, and again, look, Mike Brown tested positive for COVID-19, and I was texting him, and he's like, I'm like, yo, how do you feel? Are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I feel fine. there are a lot of guys that will probably, and ladies that will probably catch COVID and have relatively mild symptoms, probably just as bad as the flu, right? But that's certainly very healthy individuals. And there's still many unknowns about COVID. Like, we don't know what ramifications COVID is like. If you had COVID, what's your health going to be like in 10 years? Like, will more stuff come from it? Like, I don't know. No one has ever had COVID, so we have no idea. But as far as, so that's for the future. Like, there's a lot of unknowns about the future. There's also a lot of unknowns about the present, because we do know that, again, it could be mild on some people, but we also know that some people end up, in the hospital. I believe it's like 10, from 15 to 10%. I saw this on NPR. This was yesterday or today. Those cases end up in hospitalization, or it might have been from 20 to 10%. And then below 10%, those are people that need ICU. So, dude, yeah, it's a big deal, because you never know who you can pass it on to, and you never know if they have any underlying conditions. Like I said, a while back when COVID was really bad in New York, I know someone that died. He was in his 30s, relatively healthy, thin, in shape, and he passed away. He died. So it's one of those things where you just don't know. So the more tests, the better. The more precautions the UFC takes, the better. I do believe that we do need to figure out how to live a somewhat normal life, the best way we can, while avoiding the most risks as possible. But at some point, again, you just can't lock everything up and stay home. So I do obviously agree with the events happening. But again, I very much agree with all the testing that the UFC is doing, because some of the testing is faulty, and you need to make sure you're catching COVID-19. And so far, everyone that's tested positive, has been caught early, has never taken a plane and gone out to Fight Island. So as far as, keeping that quarantine, they've done so far a good job. No positive tests have stemmed from Fight Island. So, yeah. All right. Already did that question. Next question is by Michael Terrell. Michael wants to know, should we be worried about fighters making weight with travel and 48-hour quarantine restrictions so close to fight day? 100%. We don't know. We don't know how all these changes are going to affect MMA, the product that we actually see in the cage, the fighters in the lead up to the actual fight, and so many other things. I mean, so far, without a crowd, I do feel like to some fighters it's benefited them, to some others maybe not. The smaller cage, for example, by taking the UFC events to the Apex, some fighters benefited from the small cage, some others didn't. And now going to Fight Island, we get the regular size cage, so there won't be any influence on that. But all of a sudden, you're adding a shit ton of travel, especially if you're coming from the US, or at least the Americas, right? If you're in Europe, it's a lot better. And then on top of that, you add a 48-hour quarantine, as you mentioned there. So once you get there, you have to quarantine in your room for 48 hours, and then they do more testing to make sure that everything is okay. So yeah, all that has to play a factor. I mean, if you're quarantined in your hotel room, do you have a sauna, right? If you want to use a sauna to sort of start getting some weight off, can you put in road work? Can you run? Can you there's certain things you can do. I'm sure you can jump rope and some body weight stuff, but certainly it gets in the way of fighters getting prepared for a fight. So I'm not extremely worried by it, because I think they know ahead of time that this was coming, so I'm sure they've planned for it. But I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the day, come Friday, maybe we see it affect weigh-ins, possibly. I think it's definitely possible. I would be concerned more with COVID-19 and the whole pandemic affecting fighters' training camp and their ability to sort of stay at a certain weight level and be prepared, rather than the actual 48-hour quarantine. I think the bigger picture here is what's more worrisome, I would say. All right. The Executioner 91. He says DC said talking. What's up? DC said taking the fight on short notice means Jorge has nothing to lose. I disagree. He has the BMF image, and the visual of Usman mauling or completely dominating him will definitely affect his stock. Only Nate Diaz's brand has managed to survive tough losses. Thoughts? Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're on point, man. You know what's funny? I've actually been disagreeing with a lot of what DC has said recently. Just don't find it. And look, it's gonna happen from time to time. Obviously, you're never gonna fully agree 100% with every single opinion, everything every single person says. But more or less, you can find some truths. You can partially agree with certain parts of an argument, or maybe where it's coming from, or this and that. But for some reason, with some of the things that he's said recently, I just don't see a lot of things like that DC might be able to see. So that's been kind of interesting. So yeah, I did see a clip on Twitter. I think it was from his show with Ariel Helwani, and he was saying this is a win-win for Masvidal. He can't lose, but I disagree completely. I mean, because think about this, Masvidal has been around for quite some time. He's a veteran. He's extremely experienced. All that, we already know that, right? You and me, if you're watching this, you're a hardcore, right? But what sells usually, what gets the pay-per-views to a level where they just become hold records, or sort of they become some of the top pay-per-views of the year, are the casuals. You need the casual fans to sort of push that over. And I feel like in the casual fans' mind, Jorge Masvidal is this unbeatable, indestructible dude that picked up the fastest KO in UFC history. They said he was gonna get out wrestled, and his weakness is wrestling. And here he goes, flying knee, puts out one of the most decorated wrestlers to compete in MMA. And Darren Till goes to his backyard and knocks him the F out. And Nate Diaz just puts away Nate Diaz and BMF, and all this stuff. Like, he's a badass. He's the baddest motherfucker in the game, right? He has that title to sort of back that up. And this whole stepping up on short notice thing is definitely a bad motherfucker thing. Is definitely badass, and it helps his street cred. But you're right. If he gets ragdoll and just completely dominated for 5 rounds, that image of being a bad motherfucker is gonna take a hit. And even worse, let's say Usman, who's been kind of ballsy lately. We've seen that in the Colby Covington fight. He can crack, and he has pretty decent striking. I mean, he's been training for a long time with Henry Hooft, and now he's been training with Trevor Whitman, who we know what he's done to Gaethje striking. Maybe he does decide to strike with Masvidal. You don't know. And if he does manage to piece him up, which I don't think it's very likely, but let's say he does, of course, that has to take a hit on Masvidal's image of being, the baddest motherfucker, right? I really disagree with Daniel Cormier's on that specific subject. I think Masvidal does have a lot to lose. Now, could he always go back and be like, well, I didn't have a full training camp. I had to cut so much weight. This, and that. The game effed me over. Like, I'm getting ready for a world title fight. Like, I should have, complete training camp here was good. And he definitely go that route, and I'm sure some fans will believe him, and I'm sure maybe some fans would want to see a rematch out of that. This is all assuming if he loses, of course. I don't know. Yeah, that definitely helps his case, but there's still that image. There's still that image. So I do believe that Masvidal is kind of putting all the chips on the table here, and gambling on himself, just like he's done against many others. And most of the times it pays off for him. So we'll see if it pays off here. But, even to the Diaz brand, to your point, a loss does take a hit. Because if you look at the height of the Diaz brand, has always been the highest coming off wins. Like when he beat Conor McGregor, holy shit. Dude, he was a superstar. And then he fought him a second time, he lost. And certainly still a star. But, again, a loss does knock some steam, off you for sure. To some fighters more than others. Some fighters really depend on wins to be relevant, right? Whereas others like Diaz could kind of get by losing here and there. Masvidal, I do feel like he's kind of like Diaz, but not to an extent where he's completely immune and he can lose and he's still the biggest star in the world, right? Like certainly, no matter what happens on Saturday, the dude's still a star. But dude, being a champion, BMF champion, and the real undisputed champ, that's gonna put you here. A loss, it's not gonna put you in the same spot a win would. So disagree there with Mr. DC, respectfully, of course. All right, this is a 3-part question. I managed to cramp it in there. Hopefully, it makes sense. So this is actual prediction topic here. What do you think? What do you think are the chances? What do you think the chances are of Masvidal beating Usman, especially considering the fact that he took this fight on 1 week notice without a full training camp? Jorge has been doing some training, but not like he would in a camp. Usman brought up the point that, part 2, Masvidal has only been training for one guy, Usman, the whole time. Well, he just had a camp for a completely different opponent, Burns. I see the point that Kamaru is trying to make, but I still think Masvidal has a significant disadvantage with not having a full training camp, especially against a good wrestler with good cardio. Yeah, so that's a good one. So who would you rather be? Think about this. Who would you rather be? Would you rather be in the shoes of a guy that's in shape and that has been training to fight for 25 minutes, but you're getting ready for challenge A, and then with 6 weeks they tell you, nope, completely different challenge. You're no longer facing a jiu-jitsu specialist with heavy knockout power. Now you're facing someone that uses volume, has really good cardio, likes to box, can do some jiu-jitsu and wrestling, but that's not necessarily his bread and butter. Completely different challenge, right? Or would you rather be the guy that is not in the greatest shape ever, but knows what challenge is ahead? So I do see the point that Usman is making, but Usman's kind of acting like if this were a John Jones, Dan Henderson situation where literally Dan Henderson is out of the fight, and then with a few days notice, they're like, yeah, you got to fight Chael Sonnen now. And he goes, wait a minute, like Chael Sonnen, he hasn't even been on my radar. Like, what the hell? I'm not going to fight him. It's not that scenario. Like, Usman knew this fight with Masvidal was coming at some point, right? I mean, they've been jawing at each other for months, so it's not like he's getting a completely new, different challenge. And being the champion, being a smart fighter that Usman is, being surrounded by smart coaches, right? Whether it's Trevor Whitman or Henry Hooft, I am sure they had done some preliminary talks about Masvidal. I'm sure they had maybe not gotten in depth about footage and all that and analyzing tape and making a strategy per se, but they certainly are aware of the challenges that are at hand. Also, keep in mind, the way we see fights is not the way they see fights. Whatever we see is completely different than what fighters and coaches are watching. Why? Because they just know more. So they're able to appreciate and catch on things that we might not normally see. Like, I used to think I had a good grasp of MMA, and I think I do, and I think most fans do as well. But I would say, having wrestled a bit and having done a good amount of jiu-jitsu, I always had a certain outlook for MMA. And then as soon as I started doing boxing, especially like 8-9 months into it, my brain started kind of consuming the product a little bit different. I'm not saying I'm going in there and sort of putting on the X-rays or thermal scope, right? Like Call of Duty, and all of a sudden I'm seeing some new shit. No, I'm not saying that. But you start picking up on things that you're like, wait a minute. Okay, I know what he's doing. Okay, this and it gets and again, that's me with a very amateurish eye, because I'm no boxing expert or jiu-jitsu expert. So think about these coaches that that's the entire I don't say existence, but like that's literally their job. Like they get paid for doing this. So, they're obviously going to have a certain type of eye and look at things differently when just watching a regular fight. So I'm sure they've picked up, on tendencies that Masvidal does. And I'm sure that they are maybe not super prepared for Masvidal, but pretty prepared. I'm pretty sure they know who Masvidal is, and Masvidal has like what 50 fights at this point, so there's plenty of footage on the guy. Like you kind of know who he is by now. I mean, you pretty much know who he is right now, not kind of. Um, so I would actually say that yeah, Masvidal is at the bigger disadvantage here, not Usman. Sure, Usman is somewhat of a little bit disadvantage, but the biggest disadvantage has to go for Masvidal because at the end of the day, can you fight for 25 minutes? That's one of the biggest things in MMA, cardio, and certainly Usman has made sure to be in tip-top shape for that as he was getting ready for a fight against Burns. Whereas Masvidal, he knew what challenge is coming, but he might not necessarily be ready to go 25 minutes. I guess we'll find out. The dude's always been in great shape. I've never seen him that I remember gas out on any fight. But again, short notice bout, so you never know. All right, this is the last Twitter question, and then I'll take things over to the YouTube live chat. So last question reads as follows. Twitter question. Knowing that Usman probably won't win too many fans, you meant to say, of a wrestling heavy game plan, do you think that Usman will forgo this path in hopes of taking some of Masvidal's clout with a win on the feet? So certainly can see that a possibility. As I said on an earlier question, Usman has been getting kind of ballsy, at least from the Kobe Covington fight, and has been fighting on, I mean, he's always been ballsy. I'm not saying that he's ballsy now and he wasn't before, but ballsy on the feet because we know he can out-wrestle guys. We know he can pin guys against the cage and take them down and out-grapple them, possibly submit them or just control them up top. He can do that. But he can also strike if he really wants to. And he can also take a punch if he really wants to. We saw that. The dude's tough as hell. The dude's got a good chin. The dude's got hands. He's got some power. So, again, training with Trevor Whitman, a guy who's got Justin Gaethje from being a wild man to having some of the most technical and most brutal striking, certainly in the UFC lightweight division, I would be confident to say, up there in the UFC roster, just in general, pound for pound, some of the most dangerous striking in the game. I'm sure Usman is picking up a thing or two from that guy, of course. I'm sure he's working a lot on his hands. And keep in mind also, Usman was in the training camp when Justin Gaethje was supposed to, or fought Tony Ferguson. So he's been training and he's been, training with guys that with Justin Gaethje who's good on the feet. So I wouldn't be surprised if Usman does a mix of wrestling just to make sure he steals rounds and just to make sure he's ahead of the judges' scorecards, but also mix things up on the feet, things that will open up, his game on the ground and also, cause a little bit of a threat on the feet. So I'm sure the strategy is to mix things up. One would think that it'd be more wrestling based because that seems to give Masvidal the most problems. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if Usman goes in there and tries to outbox him for a little bit, or at least see how it goes on the feet. I do disagree with your question. I wouldn't think it'd be because of clout. I don't think he'd be like, oh, I just want to steal Masvidal's clout and make this guy look like a fool or whatever. I think if he really does stand and strike with Masvidal, is because he feels confident, is because he feels that he can cause damage there. It's because he feels that he can have success there. I don't necessarily think that he will strike just to be cool and again, have clout and have sort of, street cred or whatever. If he strikes, is because he feels like he can find success there, period. He's too smart to fall in that trap and be like, well, I gotta get some clout. I gotta get my followers up. Let me strike with this very technical boxer. So yeah, so I think if he does it, is because he wants to and he's capable of doing that, not necessarily for clout. All right, what else we got here? So right now, this is the time of the video where I take things over to the YouTube live chat where you can drop any question that you want and I will get to it. So let's do this. I'll tackle the ones that I see that people have donated in the super chat. So I'll tackle those first, And then I'll tackle then whatever you guys ask just regularly on the comments real quick. Actually, no, fuck it. I'll do chronologically. I will get to every single one from the super chat. I appreciate it. All right, let's see. James Fallon, Cote. Wonder if he's related to Patrick Cote. That'd be kind of tight. Hey, Danny, thanks for doing this. Of course, my pleasure. Okay. Again, another question. What's happening with Nico Montano? I don't know. It's something happening with her. Any word on her? She was the first UFC flyweight champion, and I haven't heard anything since she was scheduled to move up to 135 pounds. That is a great question. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Nico Montano. I have no idea. But now that you mention it and put it on my radar, I will try to find out. Ooh, but I got to get a fan in here. It's hot because I turned off my AC, and it's summer here in New York, and I turned off so you guys can get nice, clear audio. But certainly feeling it right now. All right, another question here. With Mike Brown testing positive for COVID-19, what would happen if the majority of fighters and coaches tested positive for a major / large MMA gym? Would this change public perception of MMA as safe? No, because I at the end of the day, it's not like the UFC is gonna allow fighters to fight with COVID-19. That's not gonna happen. So literally, worst comes to worst, if you test positive, you just go back home and you isolate. That's it. You quarantine. So so MMA as a sport, it won't be looked at as unsafe. Now, it could be looked at as unsafe if two fighters were to compete and one had COVID-19 and then that sparked a series of infections, whether it's, passing it on to the opponent passing it on to their corners to the family, etc. That could be bad, especially, if proper contact tracing is done. That could be bad. But as far as just testing positive, just coaches and stuff like that from a gym, and if they're stopped and not allowed to go to an event and they're forced to quarantine, I think maybe MMA training at large gyms might be seen as unsafe. So if you're a fighter with an upcoming fight, you might want to go with the Max Holloway route and do a Zoom training camp. You might just, I don't know, if you have your boo, your significant other, have your girl or your man hold pads. You know what I'm saying? Just like what was her name? Latari Gonzalez, I believe, Mike Perry's girlfriend. You can go that route as well, right? So I certainly think if there's some sort of positive test in a big gym, I think fighters that train at big gyms might ask themselves questions like, okay, shit, testing positive for COVID-19 could definitely get me pulled from a fight. I don't know if I want to be at a large gym. I don't know if I want to be training with multiple training partners. Maybe I just get one training partner and then we train in our garage and that's it. Just to make sure to lessen the risk of testing positive, at the most that you can, of course. So I think if there's a large sort of spark of infections in the gym, like it's been kind of seeing in ATT, and also Gilbert Burns never really said there was an outbreak at his gym, but he did say the one championship champion that they trained with Henry Hooft, he tested positive. Another guy that was supposed to fight LFA tested positive. He said 2 heavyweights tested positive. He said he tested positive. His coach, Wagner Rocha, tested positive. And then another guy tested positive. So that's 7 people from a camp. So again, all those guys that might be training there, especially the ones that haven't tested positive, they might go, ooh, this is a little risky. I got a fight coming up. Let me just stay in shape and chill. Maybe that's the route. So I think that's kind of the way it would go. But I don't think MMA itself as a sport would be deemed or would be seen unsafe by the masses from fighters testing positive at gyms. Certainly wouldn't help. It's definitely not good PR, of course. Nothing is, right? If you have a restaurant and somebody tests positive for COVID-19 there, etc. But yeah. Let's see. All right, Amy Wee. Cuando Hablemos MMA. So yeah, pretty excited about this. For those that don't know, um, I announced it on Twitter on Monday, and it was first actually announced on MMA Junkie Radio with Brian Garcia and Gorgeous, or the Goes, I should say, sorry, and Gorgeous George. So I announced it there first, and then I took to Twitter and announced that I am starting a podcast 100% in Spanish for MMA Junkie. It'll obviously be under the MMA Junkie and USA Today umbrella. And I'm pretty excited about this project. This is something I've been wanting to do for quite some time. So if you're a Spanish speaker, or if you're Hispanic, Latino, or if you're maybe not Hispanic but you know a little bit of Spanish or would like to know Spanish, this would be a good podcast, and also stay within the topic. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. I've been wanting to do this for years, and finally it's happening. And I do think that it's very much needed in the space, especially in the Latin American market. And shit, I just want to be able to speak my native tongue, my first language, and be able to provide content on that language. I think it's going to be fun. And for those that consume it in English but no Spanish, you'll see in these interviews, when you speak to Hispanic fighters in their native tongue, you get a sense of who they really are, as opposed to having something translated and then come out on an article. It's certainly a difference there. So I'm excited about this, and yeah, it's a fun little project. The launch date is set for July 27th, so that's a Monday. So it's gonna be a weekly podcast every Monday, and yeah, Hablemos MMA. I'm excited. It's gonna be cool. Does a win on Saturday put Masvidal in the UFC Hall of Fame? CP asks. No. In the BMF Hall of Fame, yes. But in the Hall of Fame, I mean, he is the BMF. I don't know. Maybe. It depends how, right? Because it would certainly be a crazy run. The run that he's been would be insane. I mean, Ben Askren, Darren Till, Ben Askren, Nate Diaz, and now Usman. That's a good lineup. So I would say no, but stranger things have happened. Gary Freeman. Mike Brown positive for COVID, will not be in Masvidal's corner. Yes, as I reported earlier today, Masvidal tested positive for COVID-19, and he wasn't able to take a flight out to Abu Dhabi. I'm actually curious, who the hell is going to corner Masvidal? I asked him that, but he didn't get back to me, at least for now. But yeah, I wonder who's going to be in his corner, because Mike Brown has been in Masvidal's corner for all his fights. I mean, he was the guy holding pads, and with the video, remember, of Masvidal hitting the flying knee in the locker room before going out there and hitting it on Ben Askren. So Mike Brown has been a key component in Masvidal's coaching staff and corner staff. So we'll see how it affects. Again, all this pandemic is affecting all kinds of angles and aspects of MMA. Gustavo, super excited for Hablemos MMA. Yes, I am too. It's gonna be fun. If I bet 1,000 on Jorge Masvidal, how much would I win? Have you ever bet on a fight? I've never done. Let me pull that up. That is actually an interesting. I wonder what are the odds. I think when the odds opened, when this fight was officially announced, I believe like Sunday or Monday, Usman opened up as a 3-1 favorite, but I'm sure that's kind of moved now. And to answer your question, I've never really bet on fights through like an official betting site or some sort of betting body or whatever you want to call it. Never done that, but certainly when I was just a fan of the sport, every now and then you would be watching fights, and you'd tell your friend like, hey, $10 on this, and they'd be like, all right, it's on, and stuff like that. But no major betting. I've never bet $1,000. Never. I think, what's the biggest bet I've ever met? Yeah, no, never. I don't even have $1,000 to bet. But yeah, that's a lot of money. I don't recommend betting. So he's a plus 200, because let's see, plus 200. You bet 1,000, you win $2,200. That sounds like good money. But dude, I don't know. I don't want to say anything, because then I don't want to I don't want to be responsible and then have me give you advice on yeah you should do it and then I'd be responsible for you losing $1,000. That I feel horrible. So bet at your own risk. That's what I would say. I feel like there are better fights to bet on. I'll give you a freebie. If I had $1,000 to bet, how much for Volkanovski? Let me see. Volkanovski is a minus 225. $1,000. Oh shit! $1,000 only gets you $444. Maybe that's not a good bet. Yeah. See, I don't know. I suck at betting, but yeah. All right. Edwin Campos, thank you for the super chat donation. Well, by the way, I forgot to announce. I always do, or forgot to mention, I should say. I have unlocked the super chat. You can donate money there. Every single penny goes directly to this channel. Like I said, I invested into this light, which hopefully you guys can see me a lot better and a lot clearer now. I've bought equipment along the way, this mic, a few other things. So anything that you donate will go 100% to this channel to improve this overall experience. And also, remember I told you guys I had some things in the works. Like a lot of that was the Spanish podcast, but I also have some other things in the works as far as this channel in specific. So again, a little slow, but it's going. It's going. So this experience, as you know, it will improve. And Edwin Campos says, why don't you use the Colombian flag as a backdrop, mate? Yeah, man. I mean, certainly a Colombian flag is always nice to see, but I don't know. To be honest, I kind of like this white basic backdrop. Like it's pretty chill, in my opinion. It's not really. I don't know. It doesn't really bother me, and I feel like it's not distracting. You know what I'm saying? And if I put a flag, it's certainly a little bit more distracting. But not a bad idea. But I don't know. I think I'm just gonna keep this. If I do some sort of setup, I would put like MMA or combat sports memorabilia and things like that. And kind of do something more of a studio feel rather. And maybe I'll have something Colombian. Maybe you know what? I still have the scarf that the Colombian scarf that we had over that Luke and I had over at the MMA Hour studio, and I still have the same aguardiente bottle that we had in the studio, and we took shots in the very first episode and the last episode. That's the one thing I took before leaving MMA fighting on my last day. I'm like, fuck it, I'm taking the bottle of aguardiente. So I took it from the office. I mean, no one was gonna drink it. And also, I think Luke paid for it anyway. So yeah, I took that and it's still here. So that aguardiente, I haven't drinking it because I feel like it's the shittiest aguardiente you can find. Luke actually did. I don't know if maybe he prefers that brand. I don't know what it is, but there's actually a lot better aguardiente than Cristal. Cristal is like if you're low on money but you're trying to get turned, you get Cristal. But it has a sentimental value. So even though it's cheap, I do have it there and drink it on occasion. Maybe if I have Luke on as a guest, that'd be kind of tight. Maybe we can virtually drink some aguardiente and yeah, it would be like full circle kind of thing. But yeah, I would do something like that. Like do like a studio setup and like do like a cool background, not just a flag. And it could have a Colombian flag, but I wouldn't want a flag to like take the whole backdrop. So yeah. Do you think Khabib retires? Yeah, at some point. I don't think anytime soon though. I do believe I believe he's gonna fight again. All right, so Philip Markovich donated $8 to Super Chat. I appreciate it, sir. What do you think of Alec Rakic as a fighter? Most believe he actually beat Ozdemir. And thoughts on his alleged upcoming bout with Anthony Smith. So let me pull that up because believe it or not, sometimes us reporters that cover MMA cycle, just the MMA news, like this shit moves quite fast. So you sometimes miss a lot of stuff. I had not heard of, where I think I did hear of the Anthony Smith booking. Let me see. Let me see. All right, so I got him pulled up here. Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. He fought in Korea, South Korea, when he lost to Volkan Ozdemir via split decision. Um, to be honest, I don't have like a really strong opinion on the guy, but I do remember his win over Jimmy Manua. That was a nice finish, a nice first round head kick knockout. And he's beaten Barroso, Justin Ledet, Devin Clark is a solid fighter as well. Um, so to be honest, I don't have really a super strong opinion, but I would say this: a fight with Anthony Smith, that's a big fight, and if he truly is a world class fighter and one of the top fighters in that division, maybe he didn't get to prove it against Ozdemir. Maybe things should have gone his way, but he'll get a chance to do so against Anthony Smith, who I'm not gonna say he's in a decline, but he's certainly not where he was at when he beat when he was on that incredible run that ended up getting him the title shot, and also had him defeat Alexander Gustafsson, two-time UFC title challenger. So certainly a win over Anthony Smith. You got to go, okay, you might not be the best in the world, but you're certainly up there among the best. So we'll see. Big fight for him, and I believe that's official. Maybe I don't think it's rumored. But I appreciate the super chat donation very much. All right, I'm gonna go here probably 10 more minutes. Let's see. All right, Neil the security. I keep hearing people mention the smaller cage. Isn't this going to take place in the normal octagon? Yeah. All the Fight Island events are going to take place on the regular octagon, regular size. So no worry about that. The Fight Island series, the whole thing, will take place in a regular octagon. The only thing that changes is when the UFC goes back to Apex after July. So that's going to be in a smaller octagon. We're going to get Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier in a smaller octagon. So that's going to be a sight to see. That's going to be interesting. Let's see. Let's throw a couple more. Justin Carter. So this is a little bit of a complex question, and yeah, with Kareem Sidan's article on Renzo Gracie coming out, I have a question. What is it with fighters angling themselves with brutal dictators like Kadyrov? So I have not read it. When I read the first part of your question, I thought you meant about something else, some controversy Renzo Gracie had over Twitter. I think he quoted who was it? I can't even pronounce this guy's name, but I believe from what was alleged, I haven't done my research, but from the Bloody Elbow article, it was a Nazi, and somebody called him out, and they're like, "Why are you quoting this?" And then, yeah, and then I know a lot of people have had issues with sort of what Renzo Gracie has been posting online, and I know he posts stuff on Portuguese as well, but my Portuguese isn't 100%, so I don't know exactly what he's saying. But to answer your question, let me just do a quick search here just so I know what I'm talking about. Obviously, I'm aware of Kadyrov and his presence in MMA, and that's been a weird and strange topic in MMA because it's so out of left field, and it's just like we don't. It's not like there isn't like a whole lot of information on the dude, and the things that are out there are pretty, again, crimes against humanity and just things that you do not want to be associated with. And yet he has this sort of presence, especially in that part of the world in MMA. He has pictures with Khabib and others, and yeah, it's definitely a topic that, to be quite honest, I'm not as familiar with. Obviously, this is more of a question for Kareem Saddam, who actually is an expert on these kinds of things, and actually his beat and his focus is to report on these kinds of things. And I'm glad that there's someone that's doing that. And yeah, I should do a little bit of a better job at informing myself on this kind of information. But yeah, everything from the things that I've seen, like it is worrisome that there are disconnections as well. And this is not the first time, and this is not the only guy that, or the only time, combat sports is connected to sketchy people. For some reason, combat sports is connected to a lot of sketchy people. Don't know what it is about it. The mechanics of the sport or the type of people that are attracted to it maybe are prone um, to that kind of scene. I'm not sure, but certainly something to keep an eye on for sure. Appreciate the super chat donation. Um, let's see. All right, Liam Devine says, "What's going on with Kobe? Not seen or heard much from him. Plus, he has been what? I haven't heard much or him. Plus, he has been kicked from ATT. Jorge said he had not been training anyway and is finished. Well, that's what Jorge says, and Jorge hates his guts. So, I wouldn't expect him to say anything. I'm not saying he's lying, but he's definitely in a biased position. I'll say this: when the last time I went to ATT, I saw both of them running to each other, and they just started yelling at each other and calling each other out from across the gym. And everyone was kind of like, "Oh shit, it's something gonna happen." But Masvidal just kept walking and just kept talking shit. And at that time, they were still in the same gym, but training at different times. And then I went up to Colby and I was like, "Hey, introduce myself." And then I was doing interviews, so I'm like, "Oh, would you want to talk?" And he's like, "Oh no, I gotta get out of here because if I see Masvidal, I'm gonna break his face. Like we can't train at the same time or whatever." So I'm like, "Wow, all right." And we're supposed to set something up for later, but it didn't come to fruition. But anyways, that was like last September or some shit like that. It was a long time ago. I don't know. Yeah, I'll probably reach out to Colby. That's actually a good question. I don't know what he's been up to. No idea. I think he did an interview with ESPN MMA. I'm not quite sure. ¿Vas a hablar con Jorge en español? Dude, I'd love to have Jorge Masvidal on the podcast. Definitely, I'll try to push for that. Obviously, he is a man that's very busy and hard to get these days, given his schedule and sort of his stardom. But if I can, I certainly will have him on the show for sure. That's the idea. All right. Any more questions out there? Going once, going twice. Another question here. I mean, we kind of talked about this. Khabib's next fight is going to be so emotional for him. Is it? I don't know. Obviously, his dad passed away, and that's huge. But he's also a guy that's always been very composed, even when fighting Conor McGregor, and obviously fighting someone that's been insulting you and all this, and fighting somebody you dislike very heavily or maybe even hate. It's a much more different feeling than fighting after the death of your father. I don't want to compare the two, but I would say that um, he's certainly proven to stay composed and not fight emotional situations. So I don't know, but at the end of the day, this only happens one in your lifetime, right? Like you're a parent going away, so we don't know how he's gonna react. But my guess is that he returns when he's ready to return, and once he's ready to return, he's gonna be ready to compete. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think, um, I don't think again, I don't know, but I don't suspect it'll damage his career, and then he won't be the same and fight emotional or something. Do you think maybe? Do you think Jorge Masvidal has a chance in the fight this weekend? So I don't know. That's a good one. I do think he has a chance. I give him a decent chance. Like it wouldn't surprise me if he wins completely. But I don't know if I expect him to win. I think for now I got to go with Usman. I mean, he's had the full training camp. He's the champion, right? But I wouldn't count out Masvidal. I mean, the guy, again, he knows how to fight. If there's anybody that can pull off not being in camp and then getting ready for a fight and then, pull up at a fight, it's Masvidal. The dude's a born fighter. He doesn't need a training camp to perform well. He might need a training camp to be at his best, but he doesn't really necessarily need a training camp to perform well and be a world-class fighter, in my opinion. So, I'll say this. I'll go with Masvidal this weekend. I'll even go with Masvidal on my MMA Junkie staff picks. Making my decision right now. I think he's improved. I think his wrestling defense has improved. Overall, he fights with more urgency. He's become a much more dangerous fighter. And frankly, the odds should be in Usman's favor, but I believe in sports. A lot of magic happens in sports, and Masvidal winning would be magical. I feel like it will happen. So just throwing it out there. Going with Masvidal, official pick. All right, yeah. So that does it. Let me double check here. Any more questions? I want to make sure I don't want to skip any. I'll skip a couple. Dude, people. Yeah. All right. So that does it. Just a couple of things. Obviously, UFC 251 this weekend. Big card. Excited for that event. So I will be having some sort of reaction. I don't know if I'll have a preview. I think this will kind of serve as a preview. I'll be busy all this week because obviously the fights are this weekend, and I'm working on launching the podcast, Hablemos MMA, and I got a lot on my plate, so I don't want to overload that. So you guys won't be getting a preview from me for UFC 251, but likely a recap on Sunday. I'll probably do a live one if you guys are down. So be on the lookout for that. I will obviously, like always, anything that I do on this channel, it will be announced on Twitter. So I'll post on Twitter when I'll be going live. Maybe I'll bring on a guest, maybe, rather than doing it solo. I'll figure that out. We still have a few days ahead. So yeah, let me figure it out. Maybe I do bring on a guest. Or I'll just do it solo. Either way, just know that a recap of UFC 251 is coming sometime on Sunday. Stay tuned to that. And yeah, like I said in one of the questions, I'm launching a Spanish MMA podcast. It's called Hablemos MMA, and I'm really excited for this project. So I appreciate the support. And if you're a Spanish-speaking fan, I think this would be great for you. I think you guys are going to love it. And yeah, it's going to be cool. I think this podcast and having this platform and, sort of this, just this podcast, this show, I think it's going to unlock and it's going to shine light to a lot of things that were maybe in the dark or perhaps not as highlighted or as as well known as in the space. Certainly the language barrier gets in the way of a lot of good stories, and I feel like this podcast will break that barrier. And yeah, it's something I wanted to do for a long time, so I'm pretty excited for that. It's gonna be cool. And yeah, I appreciate everybody that watched, that submitted questions. So please remember, thumbs up, right? Subscribe to the channel, and shouts out to everybody that donated in the super chat. Much love. And yes, I will be back with a UFC 251 reaction in this very YouTube channel. So thank you for the time. Have a good rest of your week and enjoy the fights this weekend.